So the arrival of my WeAreOne Arrival happened a week ago. We got it built up, and then, of course, we were jonesing to get it out on the trail. Unfortunately, April in the PNW has not cooperated. We got snow, slush, freeze, thaw, cycle, standing water, peanut butter trails, you name it. All the really cool places are hurting right now. But one cross-country trail close to Seattle is almost always rideable, is Aqua's Grand Ridge. Not the most challenging, not the most exciting, but it's good dirt, it's a workout, and most of all, it's available. Maybe we couldn't stretch at the arrival out on Grand Ridge, but we could at least get an initial feel for what the bike is all about. Now, before I go on, I should say I paid for my arrival out of my own pocket, so nothing on this video is sponsored, even though you might think so from the way I'm going to go on about this bike. First climb of any consequence. This is pretty loose and it's steep, so you often spin out or squirt rocks from your tires. Yeah, it's doing pretty well so far. Not had any spin out, and it feels pretty good. It has a low front end, which I like. I have long arms. The rear end really bites in. Very secure. The bike also tends to put you in a pretty forward facing position, so you got more weight toward the front, but without unweighting the rear enough to cause problems. And the standover height, because of the low top tube, is the standover clearance is pretty good and confidence inspiring in case you do spin out or need to go off the bike. Now, the more climbing I did, the more impressed I was. Incredibly, and I say this with all due consideration, incredibly, the Arrival climbs better than any short travel, lightweight, cross-country bike I've ridden, including my Spot Ride, which was the best climber I'd ridden prior. I'm calculating in the halo factor of a new bike here as well. There's some secret formula on the part of the WeAreOne crew that I'm still unpacking. Undoubtedly, the steep seat angle and the low front end help contribute, and don't forget the role of the suspension, which I was running at the recommended 20% sag. That's short sag. But now that I've had some time to think it over, I'm still scratching my head how this fairly heavy bike for me at 32 plus pounds could glide up the long fire roads, jam up the steeps, pop over the rocks and ledges, and otherwise feel pretty effortless on the ups. There's something going on. Relationship between the seat angle and the head angle, the way the bars are positioned. You just feel like your head is out over the front of the steer tube, and that's good as long as you're not spinning out on the steeps. Your leg power just gets translated right into the drivetrain really nicely. You just feel that drivetrain respond when you put down some pedal power. Now, I did knock down the front cassette to 30 teeth from 32, and my initial thought was to go all the way down to 28. But, I never felt overtaxed on the pedal stroke. I did feel the weight a bit on the climbs, but I'm not sure I'd want to lighten this bike up just for the sake of losing a few grams. I'm kind of guessing here, but my impression is the weight gives the Arrival kind of a connection with the trail that lightening it up might throw out a kilter. We'll see as time goes on, but for now I have to say, wow, WeAreOne seems to have really cracked the code for mountain bike ascending. It's really hard to believe you're on a 150mm suspension bike. By the way, this is not just me. The Arrival won its class and in fact was the only bike to conquer Pink Bike's impossible climb last fall on a course a lot harder than anything I've ridden so far. One thing that's I don't quite understand about the bike yet is how it can feel so planted and yet the rear end is so lively. Now, on my evil following, I always felt the rear end was lively, but I never felt really planted. Never felt really secure. I would wash out. And it just felt squirrely. So this doesn't do that. This, when the rear end hits a corner or goes over a ledge, man, it just follows the bike and follows you right with it. There's no kickback, no bucking, and it doesn't feel dead either. I'm about 175 to 180 with gear, and I've got it at 155, I'm sorry, 255 pressure in the shock, and that feels pretty good. There's a lot of responsiveness in the rear end. So yeah, I'd say that's the thing that blows me away. Most usually there's a trade-off. Okay, here we go. Woo! Yeah. Oh, nice. Woo! Yeah, usually there's a trade-off with liveliness versus a feeling of security, feeling that you're totally in control. With this, I think you're getting the best of both worlds. And like I say, not sure what the secret elixir is that WeAreOne has put together for this bike. Dustin Adams knows what he's doing. It feels like a freaking downhill bike. But in a shorter travel package. That said, I haven't begun to use all the travel on this thing. This is a fairly, it's a middle blue trail, Grand Ridge near Seattle. It's fun, but it's not what you would call challenging, although, you know, any trail at speed can be challenging. That said, I can't wait to take this out on some real jank and see what happens. It's just a package. It's just an overall do it all, do everything with confidence and panache. That's right, I said panache. Everything you could ask for. I hope I'm not hyping it too much. I don't know if I can, because it really does do special things. Like I say, I've owned more than 30 bikes and ridden hundreds of bikes over the past 3 decades. And I really waited a long time on the long travel. Now, this is not considered long travel anymore. I guess it's kind of considered mid-travel one, 5160, but it's long travel as far as what I do or need. And I waited a long time for a 29. And I had the Bronson, same travel, 27.5. Yeah. But most of the long travels I looked at. Hey, thank you, it's just me. Most of the long travels I looked at were monster trucks. even the short travel 29ers seem like monster trucks. Well, not the, I wouldn't say the Evo following does not seem like a monster truck, but some of the shorter travel 29ers felt like they were trying to emulate a longer travel 29er. But anyway, this just doesn't, this just hits, it hits so many sweet spots, you know? Now about this point is where the typical bike review says, although it climbed well, it was on the descents where this bike really rocked. And I'm not going to say that. Not because the bike didn't do well on the descents, but here's the deal. The Arrival doesn't do one thing better than another thing. And that's what really stuns me about the bike. It separates the Arrival from the vast mass of mountain bike tech. Because of its liveliness on the climbs, I expected the trade-off to be less swoosh on the downhill. You know, it wouldn't suck up the hits as well. It would be less confidence-inspiring over roots and chunk. It would bounce around rather than the track changes. The suspension would feel like it rides higher in the saddle and offers less travel. So this is my first ride, of course, and there's lots to come ahead. But what I found on this ride was that the Arrival is, I think the current jargon is planted. But, you know, even that doesn't quite capture how well the Arrival reacts to terrain and rider input. There's some magic going on with the Arrival suspension that makes bike feel springy and bottomless at the same time. The moment you carve a berm or hit a rock, run a rack of rubble, the Arrival just adjusts on the fly. It's like you're dancing on wheels, and your partner is following your every move just perfectly. You know, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers for you vintage MTBers out there, and Dancing with the Stars for the younger folks. My first ride left me with two distinct impressions about the Arrival. First, you know, this for me qualifies as that elusive do-everything, single quiver bike we've been longing for all these years. I see no sacrifices in building the Arrival as a cross-country bike or a full enduro. And in fact, WeAreOne just released adapter kits to mod the travel down to 130 millimeter or up to 170 millimeter from the stock 152 millimeter. I'm going to keep my Arrival right where it is. But, you know, the options are there for those who want to give them a try. My second impression is that the Arrival is the first mountain bike I've ridden that has no real trade-offs. By that I mean it doesn't sacrifice on the climbs for what it gains on the downhill and vice versa. No, it's not a pocket rocket on the uphills, and no, it's not a monster truck on the downhill, but it climbs and descends equally well as pulling off everything in between just fine. Whether I'm taking the Arrival up to 10,000 feet this summer or plunging down a 20% average grade, you know, I feel like this bike is going to be right there, offering me all the support I could ask for of any ride. I'll be back in future weeks with a long-term review, of course, but for now, I hope to see you on my Arrival out on the trail.